name is Pete Shoemaker. I'm from the PG&E Pacific Energy Center. It's an instructional center, a training center that's been around for 20 years in San Francisco, and there's a sister center in Stockton that's been around for 35 years. I'm an instructor with PG&E, and it's my pleasure to talk about solar. And I will also be introducing later on Mike Zweifel from Modesto Irrigation District, who is the local utility here, who will be the one that's actually directly interacting with solar. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about solar basics, the principles of solar and how the utility works with the solar and all that stuff. It's the same, doesn't matter where you interconnect it. And my background is that I was I bought a solar system back about 10 years ago in Pacifica, which is on the coast, you know where it is, South San Francisco, in the fog. And it's been working great for over 10 years. And then I bought that system when I was out of a job, and I put it on my home equity line of credit, and my wife and I had a very interesting discussion about whether I should do this when I was in the middle of looking for a job because I got docked out of my old job. And I did get the thing because I wanted to do it because I felt it was the right thing to do. Then I got a job with a local sales guy who sold me the system who needed a salesperson. And I started selling solar for about 3 years down in the South Bay in Santa Clara. So I was climbing up on roofs, talking to homeowners just like you, looking at the shade, looking at the money, looking at all that sort of thing. And then this job opened up in PG&E where I can teach solar for widely across the state. So I jumped on that, and it was a very good job for me. So my background is sort of a salesperson. I have a system. Mike has a system that's been working for how many years, Mike?
4 years.
4 years. We've got them around here. And so if I sound a little bit like a salesperson, I am a convert. But that doesn't mean that solar works for everybody. So we're going to talk about the realities of it for your house and how it works. One thing, this is my contact information. I'm here afterwards. You can get my cards, and Mike will be there. Our job is to help you go solar. So I'm never too busy to take your questions or take your emails or help you out that way. So here's a question for you. Anybody a Giants fan? This year was not the best year, but the last couple of years, right? Okay. And watching the broadcasts on Giants on the television, if you can tell me, just a guess, of what the 3 things that are most heavily advertised on the Giants broadcasts are. Now, one of them's obvious, right? Okay, beer is one, there you go. And when guys drink beer, what do they kind of drive when they think, kind of the manly thing that guys drive would drink beer? Trucks. You got beer and trucks, and what's the third? It's kind of an easy question because that's why we're here. Solar, right. Have you seen those advertisements? When I first saw them back in 2010, I thought, wow, this is great. This is solar on the TV. Now I'm sick of them, just like anybody's sick of advertisers. But the point being is that solar is pretty normal. If it's in with beer and trucks in America and baseball, you know it's kind of mainstream. And that's the point I want to make, is solar is not necessarily the hippie geek, tree hugger alternative energy anymore. It's Mike's, right now his district has had his record number of applications and people signing up. The growth period is 60, 70, 80, 100% a year, depending on where you look in the country. I got a son who works for Solar City, the largest solar installer in the world, and he's living in Las Vegas and doing interconnections for the entire country. So it's becoming more and more normal, and that's the key thing I want to talk to you about. A lot of people do it, vendors do it, you can interact with solar, all that sort of thing. You don't really have to be a specialist on it at all. It's just pretty normal stuff. Now, another thing now, when you moved into your home recently, or whenever you did, and were hooked up to the utility, either MID or PG&E, did you need to know how the electricity was generated from PG&E or MID? No. How did you sign up to, did you need to buy any equipment to do that? No, you signed up, said, give me this monthly, I'll put some, and that's it. I'll pay for what I use. That is becoming more and more the norm on how people purchase solar. They often, about 60 to 70% around the country now is leased systems, which means that they don't put much down or no money down. They can put some if you want to. You pay by what you use, and if you sell your house and the other person is going to pick up the new owner is going to pick up the lease, you can have the lease transferable. So there's many different options on buying solar. We'll talk about cash a little bit, and that's a way to go. But if you don't have a lot of equity in your home, you feel like you may move soon or something like that, the lease may be a great option for you. So there's lots of different ways to buy. So that's the thing, normal, and it's also easy way to buy. You don't have to know about the technology. I will teach you a little bit about how it works, but you don't really need to know, because a lot of times if you lease the system, the other company will just take care of it for you. You just say, give me electricity, I'll pay for what I use, and away you go. I got enough to do with my life. All right, so let's go here. First thing I want to talk about. Energy efficiency, and there's booths out there that talk about energy efficiency, mortgages and things like that, is the first thing to do regardless of whether you go solar or not. You have a utility bill that's compared to the size of your house right here. And you're going to put solar panels on that depending on how much your bill is. If you can use energy efficiency measurements, which can be very low cost, and there's a lot of money out there to help fund them, to lower that, then you can knock off some pretty expensive solar panels. Now, solar prices are going down, but still, if you can knock off solar panels, the payback you're going to get from your energy efficiency will be good without solar, but it's even better with solar in reducing the size of the system. So solar with energy efficiency is the way to go. Okay? So any questions, or put your hand up? I've got plenty of time. Yes, sir.
Is it worthwhile if you have a system to convert to electric appliances?
That's a case-by-case basis. In general, heating things with electricity is more expensive than heating with gas, but there may be some situations where a gas tankless water heater or something like that, or electric heat pump may be a good way to go. And I can take those questions afterwards, but the people out there are the vendors, and you can check their track record, but they're pretty solid people. I've met a lot of them in the industry, and they're your best people to go to when you talk about combining these sort of things. I'm always your backup, or Mike would be your backup if you want to email me and say, I'm not sure about what this person's telling me. But, and I can take that question offline, but it's case by case. There's no one straight answer to say, yeah, get a tankless water heater with a PV system, something like that. Okay, so now.
It does work, though.
It does work, yeah.
I have one.
They can be good. They can be good. All right, so now, just really quickly, if you hear solar, and I want to make sure there's different varieties. We're going to talk about solar PV, photovoltaic, which is electricity directly from sunlight. Then there's also these things called concentrated solar power. You may have read about them. They are large things out in the desert that have these big concentrators, and they focus the sunlight on some kind of a tube. It turns to steam and makes an electric generator. Those are large-scale systems, not home-scale. But there's also solar pool heating and solar water heating. Anybody have a pool here at your house? Does anybody have solar on their pool? Get it. I mean, that's one of the best paybacks you'll ever have. You'll use that pool much more often, and it'll be much, much cheaper to heat it. So that's something that some of these vendors will talk about, solar pool heating and solar water heating, which is for your showers and dishwashers, somewhat similar. I'm not going to talk about those, but those are good programs, have good rebates for this type of water, not for the pools, but the others. And so if you want to also consider that. You can do both. You can do a PV system and a solar water heating system on your roof. They can work well together. Yes, sir.
The first one, electricity produced, how much of it is light, how much of it is sunlight? Is there quite a difference there?
Well, it takes sunlight to run these things. They're not going to run underneath the bulbs very much. And so, yeah, the sunlight shines on them, and it's direct. It's not from the heat, it's the sunlight.
Can you, in a cloudy day here in the wintertime, can you get a damn thing?
I am the perfect person to talk about fog. I'm telling you, in August, I have gotten my windshield wipers on, and yes, my system works. I get it on even a terrible day when it's practically raining in August. I'll get about 10% of my thing, and on a normal foggy day, I'll get 50 or 60%. You have excellent weather here. Even in that morning Thule fog, you'll get good production. Okay, so solar is growing fast and the prices are dropping, and that's a good news. And even the rebates have been dropping from PG&E, but that doesn't affect the affordability because the prices are dropping, but MID still has some good rebates, so that's an extra benefit. Okay. So now let's talk about, this is the main kind of elevator speech. If you can get this, then the rest of the stuff will kind of make sense about how this net meter works. Your home needs electricity, right? Right now you're a renter. There's a grid out there of all kinds of generators that feed into the grid, whether it's PG&E or MID, and you rent a small portion of the output of that grid. What can change now is that you can buy a system like I did in Pacifica on mine, and that system will, in a sense, be like the first system in line. Imagine these are all lined up, and this is the first. This supplies your home for whatever it can do, depending on the sun and the size of the system. And whatever your home needs that this doesn't supply, then the grid automatically fills in. So solar produces the same stuff, the same electricity as the grid does. It simply does it directly from the sun, and you own that system. And I'll show you how it interacts with the grid. So that's the really simple answer, is it's the same stuff. You take a solar system for all your appliances in your home, not specifically for certain appliances, just for the home usage, just as if it were a grid. Okay? So this stuff is reliable. It's got history up in space for 40, 50 years on Earth. It requires good sun. The only thing that can knock PV, solar electric, out is shading. If you have a lot of trees that shade your house, particularly in the middle of the day, you may not be a good candidate. You might trim some of them, that's okay, but shading will do it. The rest of it, the weather here is great. Yours is much better than mine because you have much less fog, and it is not taxable. If you put a PV system on your house, the law says that the state or the county cannot reassess your house for a higher value and make you pay increased real estate taxes. But if you sell your house, the system can be appraised to raise the value of the house. And then there's studies that say that solar houses have been selling for more and selling quicker than non-solar houses. And I've got a lot of classes that are targeting real estate professionals to help them assess these things as we see more and more of them. So that's kind of the basics here. The warranties are typically around 20 to 25 years, and the track record has said that they do hold up. Okay, so solar can be a solid investment with low risk and good return. The one thing you can't do on solar easily is cash it in. You put a CD in, you get maybe 2 or 3%, but you can cash that out if you want to. Solar investments around here for a good house can give you 8, 10, 12%. Non-taxable, solid return with very good, very little risk. And you have a lot of protection with the rebate program about warranties and things if something does go wrong. Okay, so I want to keep this thing moving kind of not too fast, but I don't want to make sure it's not too long, and I want to give Mike some time. So I'm going to go through the basics of this net metering and how the technology works, and then we can have some time for questions afterwards. So this is, you get basically, the sun shines on something that looks like a computer chip, very solid state, and an electron pops out and goes through a circuit. That's a cell, and a module is a bunch of these cells, and then you can put as many of these modules together as you want. Now you saw the one out there, it's got what, 200 panels? That's a big one. You can put one for 10 panels on your house, and if maybe 5 years from now you buy an electric car, you could put another 5 more. So it's very adaptable.
What's the dimensions of that module panel?
That's about 5 feet by 3 feet. You can see, I think the vendors have them out there, they weigh about 35 pounds. One thing to know, it's not a big deal as far as weight on the top of your house. The dead load of that thing is about 4 pounds a square foot, so it doesn't worry about falling your roof down. Not a problem at all. There's a couple of different types of these things, but the one that you're going to mostly think about is what's called crystalline, and that's the one they're pretty much going to sell. And it's made from these kind of crystals that are, it's got the longest track record in the world. If you hear something in the papers called thin film, you may hear that in the papers. It's a different type of technology, not as popular for homes. So we're going to focus on the crystalline technology, which is the basic and has the longest track record. So I'll just skip over this for a second here. So now the panels generate a current from sunlight, and that's called DC or direct current. You don't really have to know electricity too much, but you notice a direct current goes in one direction. The point is that the grid that we have here is called alternating current. It goes back and forth about 60 times a second. So that's what we have to adapt to. So you have a device called the inverter, which changes the DC to the AC. You'll see that big truck out there from SMA company. They're one of the major inverter companies in the world, and this is what they do. So that's part of the hardware. You have the panels and the inverters. Now, they both have warranties, and you have to, the system, you have to keep an eye on both of them. But what's happening now is that you have not just an inverter for the entire system. That was the way it used to be. Now there's also what's called microinverters. So the point being that you may get a bid involving either one inverter for the entire house or smaller inverters on each panel. And there's different advantages and disadvantages of these things, but they're both legitimate products. I don't have time to go into the details of what's about them. I'm happy to take questions offline, but you may get a bid out there with a microinverter, and actually that could be quite good, especially if you have some shading on your house. So again, they're both legit, and you want to check the warranties. Some of the microinverter warranties are much longer than the system inverters, so you have to factor that in as well. So just how these things hook up, you've got the array on the roof of the panels, and you've got the inverter. Let's say there's a system inverter here. You've got the electrical panel of your house, the meter, the things that use electricity, and underneath is all the other stuff, the hardware that mounts the system on the roof and wires it up. That's really all the stuff that you have, except for a monitoring piece. And now that you can have something that's hooked online, so you can take a look at it online. So you might want to get that, and that's a good thing to have. Most systems now are going to offer some kind of monitoring so that they can check it at the office or at the vendor to make sure it's working properly. You can make sure it's working properly. So if you can get that as an option, I would encourage you to do so. Okay, so here's, you got the panels on the roof, you got some conduit hiding the wire, it goes down into the inverter, or there'll be microinverters, but the same principle. There's the meter, and it goes out to the grid. So let's talk about the terms that you're going to need to make sure that you can go out there and assess those bids properly. So the point here is that you get aware, you can talk to the contractors, make sure that you understand what they're saying, and if not, you can give me a call and I can make sure that I can interpret for you what they're saying so that you can assess the bids. Now, you know how to work with contractors. You check them out, you get 3 bids, you check their references, all the same logic that you would deal with any contractor that builds a deck or builds a roof, you would do with these solar contractors. In addition, I'll give you some other information so you can understand what bids they might give you. The system size is what you're buying. The system size is kind of a sizing thing that says the maximum power that the system can have. Just like you do a 200 horsepower engine or a 5-gallon bucket, that's the max it has. If you get a 4,000 watt or a 4 kilowatt system, which is a pretty good size around here, that means that at max sunlight, at noontime, it's got the capacity of producing 4,000 watts or 4 kilowatts of power. So that's just a number. It's related to how much energy you use, and the vendors can explain to you about the prices and things. But that's pretty much the one number you're going to think about. I'm buying this size engine, and that's what I'm paying for because it's going to produce a certain amount of power. Okay, now you all know about batteries and things. The thing is that solar systems only produce during the day, obviously. So what at night? What about at night? Well, there are systems out there, and in the past, your only option was to hook up batteries. So the system charges up the batteries during the day, you draw off the batteries during the day and at nighttime. So you have power and you have voltage stability. So that's what you need to have with a solar system. With batteries, that's expensive. You have to buy those batteries, maintain them, store them. What's made, those were niche systems for smaller applications. And what's made it go from that to the big market that it is now is this thing called net metering, where essentially the utility takes the place of the battery. And you don't have to buy and store your own batteries and pay for them. You just pay a small charge to the utility for the privilege of using that grid that does all that stuff. So that's what you need to think about. And the key thing is that makes it kind of work, it's kind of magic, is that the utility can be the wires can be two-way. Not only can you get electricity from the utility, you can send it back up the lines. How that works on a subatomic level is kind of excuse me, magical, but it does work. So now, that's the essential idea, is that the grid is taking the place of the batteries. And the two concepts that you need to know about sizing the system, how it works, is that you can think in terms of a yearly cycle. So if you want to think about how to size the system, and this is what these vendors are going to do, they think about how much power does your house use in a year. Think on an annual cycle, because the sun varies throughout the year. So how much power does your house use during the year, and how much does the solar system generate during the year? And you can estimate that pretty well, because there's a lot of sun maps that'll tell you what a solar system is going to produce in Modesto on a roof at a certain tilt throughout the year very accurately. So you size those two to match up pretty well, and you want to basically cover your usage throughout the year and take your house off the grid. Good one. Okay, and the idea that you get this retail rate, I'll come back to that in a second. Just think in terms of a retail rate and an annual billing cycle. So the net metering is, the grid is like your battery. Your meter keeps track of all this stuff as it goes back and forth, and you buy and sell at the going rate. So let me explain that in pieces. That's the key here. So now you've got the customer side and the utility side, and the meter stands between, only checking what goes between it. Now, so then think of this as sort of split system, right? So now let's say you've got this 3 kilowatt system that at noontime is generating 3 kilowatts of power. Your load, what you're using, is only 1. So first off, your solar system is first wired to your home to make sure that it supplies what your home needs. If there happens to be a surplus, that surplus goes back into the utility through the wires. The meter records it by spinning backwards, and the utility then sells it to another customer, uses it as part of the grid. So the utility is making money off that, so it's crediting you with that money that it would make. And it's crediting you at the exact rate that the utility would make if they sold it to another customer. So basically you get a nice retail rate when you push power back into the grid. And this happens throughout the day. Let's say, for instance, I don't know about your time or use rates, but you may get an extra high rate depending on where you are. So whatever your rate is, you cash in at the spot rate. Now let's say for a second now the clouds come by and the generation drops to match the load, 1 kilowatt. At that point, nothing passes through, and the meter thinks that nothing's going on. But of course, there's a lot going on here and over here. But for that moment, it's suspended. And then at nighttime, when you're drawing but not generating, it's going this way, spinning forward normally. So you can see that during the day, back and forth, this can go depending on the sun, depending on your usage, and the meter's checking, recording debits, credits, debits, credits. And at the end of the year, it sums up the net amount. And that's why it's called net metering. And there's a yearly date when you start your system out. There'll be a true-up date when you hook it up. Say it's May 1st. That'll be your yearly date. And at the end of April 31st or 30th of next year, you will sort of settle accounts with your utility. Now I'm going to talk about what happens in PG&E territory, and Mike will fill in a little bit if there's any differences with MID in just a few seconds. So let's say that, for instance, this is a home that has a certain amount of average usage in kilowatt hours, and a solar system that's appropriately designed will produce like this. So let's say they start from May to April. During the summer, they're going to spin their meter backwards more than they're going to use, and they're going to build up credits. And then in the winter, the sun's going to go lower, and the credits can sort of roll over and fill in the debits. And you pretty much can get your utility bill down to almost zero. You're still going to have to pay a fixed charge in PG&E or MID for that privilege of using the grid, because everybody who uses the grid has to pay something. But if you do it right, that fixed charge could be $12 a month. How many people have over $200 a month on a utility bill?
What is that, a month?
A month.
$12, that's your usage for this internet.
In MID, yes, it's a fixed charge.
All year long, $12.
You have to pay a minimum of $12, but if you go from a $200 a month bill to a $12 a month bill, that's almost like zeroing it out. So that's a pretty good deal, and it gives you a very good payback. And again, for you guys here with air conditioning, it's great. So anyway, the point is that you don't have to sort of use up your entire bill. You could actually go from a $200 a month bill to a $150 a month bill and still make a very good deal. And the people out there that will show you that maybe because of the tiered rate systems here, where you pay you pay more the more you use, you might want to leave. Does it still make sense in MID to leave a little bit left over?
Yes, we have 2 tiers. The first 500 kilowatt hours
Yeah.
is about 15% less than
15%.
over 500 kilowatt hours per month.
Right. So a big key of what the bids will focus on when you get a bid is they'll ask your usage and they'll show you your tiers and they'll say, let's knock off your expensive power, and that'll give you your best payback in the top tier. If you want to go a little bit lower because you want to be a little bit greener, save a little more money, we can talk about that. So that's, you don't have to cover the entire amount to make it a good deal. So now, let's go back here. So you really do have a pretty good idea here where you have, with a solar system, I have continuous electricity. Even if my solar system goes down, the utility will fill in. I don't have to worry about it, and I have savings, but plus security. So that's kind of a bottom line of why these things are so popular. So let me quickly here. So now, will it work on your house, and can you afford it? We just sort of touched on that, and the key with that is if you have a good location, then shading is the key thing. So you don't have to assess this. You can have one of the vendors come out for free. They will give you a bid for free to see if your house has good shade. Now, most people, like I said, I went to high school in Stockton. My dad still lives here in Stockton. I know the valley, and generally, you've got some great areas, and so you don't have to worry too much about sun here.
You don't need to be a rocket scientist. Just understand, and generally speaking, the technology is really the last thing you need to worry about. It works. Solar has been around since the dawn of the space age. It's very mature. The warranties are outstanding. The panels are generally warranted for 20, 25 plus years. There are panels that were made 35 years ago that are still operating. You get a little bit of degradation over time. It's not bad. Generally about 0.5% to 0.75% per year. Meaning, after 25 years, you might see a 15, worst case, 20% degradation in the output. That's not that bad. The technology works. But to me, what's very, very important is the economics. If money matters, and I have yet to find too many people where it doesn't matter, it's important to understand the basic economics. And in MID, I've crunched these numbers a bazillion times. Generally speaking, within MID, you're looking at a simple payback of about 8 to 12 years. Now, there's some variance there. That's not, every system is a little bit different. The big factors that are going to govern the payback is how much you pay for the system is a big factor. And it is important to be a good consumer. I see applications every day, and the variance on prices are well over 2 to 1. In other words, we see similar systems that can be twice as costly as the lowest price. And it doesn't mean that the lowest price system is necessarily the one you should go for, but just be a good consumer, get a couple of bids. I tell people to look at the price per watt, not that it's everything, but you take your total gross cost of what the contractor is quoting you, you divide it by the wattage. There's 1,000 watts in a kilowatt. Make sure you're comparing either the DC rating or the AC, and that gives you a basic metric, a basic measure of how much you're paying. It's like shopping for a price of gasoline. Are you going to pay $4 a gallon, or are you going to pay $3.50 a gallon? No difference. You just want to make sure you kind of bear that in mind. There are legitimate differences in cost because of systems. Not every system is identical. There are subtle differences house to house, but be a good consumer and make sure you shop around. The 8 to 12 year simple payback in MID generally is the payback after factoring in the MID incentive and after factoring in the 30% federal tax credit. So in my case, I've had my system for about 4 years. I've got about 4 or 5 more years before my system will be paid for. After that, it's all gravy, so to speak. Some specifics about our program. MID's program, it's a price per watt of capacity. As Pete was mentioning, the systems are sized by their maximum output capability. A typical system, my system's about a 5 kilowatt system. I've got about a 2,900 square foot house with a pool, and that system offsets 100% of my need of my electricity on an annual basis. Now, for a 2,900 square foot home, my usage is very, very small. My wife and I are empty nesters, our kids are away, and I've worked for MID for 30 years. I know everything about energy efficiency. We run our house very, very, very efficient. We have high efficiency appliances. That's really abnormal. Most customers would use probably twice as much, 1.5, twice as much electricity. But to that point, as Pete mentioned, make sure that you do the common sense efficiency things around your house first. Compact fluorescent lamps, shade screens where applicable, high efficiency appliances, especially your air conditioner. If you've got a 15, 20-year-old air conditioner, the new air conditioners today are almost twice as efficient. You can cut in half your air conditioning costs with a new high efficiency air conditioner. It doesn't mean you need to go out today and replace a perfectly functioning unit, but generally speaking, if that unit starts giving you some problems, it's more than 15 years old, get a new one. You're going to increase your efficiency dramatically. MID's got rebates for that measure as well. But by making your home more efficient, you can downsize the size of your solar system. And generally speaking, with a typical 10-year payback on solar, there's a lot of energy efficiency things that will pay for themselves in as little as 6 months to a year to 3 or 4 years. It makes sense. Just don't ignore efficiency. A kilowatt hour saved is no different than a kilowatt hour generated. And so make sure you don't cast a blind eye to that. Net metering. Pete gave a great, talk about how net metering works. And really, in a nutshell, the way to think of that is that basically there's going to be times of the day, times of the year when your system is going to potentially generate more than your home is using. During those times, you're sending that excess power back out to MID. Your meter spins in reverse. You are credited for that energy, and you can take advantage of it later that day, later that month, later that year. It's trued up on an annual basis. In my system, which is what I call a full requirement system, meaning that my system on an annual basis generates all the energy I use on an annual basis, I have months where I under-generate. Typically, that's in the middle of winter and in the middle of summer. Middle of winter, because our days are short, we have a lot of bad weather, the sun's not shining, and you don't generate as much. I'm indoors, I'm cooking, I got more lighting going on. I under-generate in those months. In the middle of summer, I slightly under-generate because I'm using more air conditioning, even though the summer is very strong as far as your PV generation. That's very typical. But the important takeaway for you to realize is it's trued up on an annual basis, and you get the full retail benefit of the rate.